Welcome to Anthropology with Professor P. Today we're going to talk about the concept of culture. It's funny because I've been teaching this class a long time and I have a lot of students that tell me, Professor P, I don't have culture. We all have culture. We're going to talk about some of the student objectives for this module. The first one, we're going to understand the concept of culture and how we utilize it in the field of anthropology. We're also going to analyze cultures that we traditionally study as anthropologists, as well as global populations like ourselves. Third, we're going to analyze and understand the methodologies that anthropologists use in gathering data, things like fieldwork and participant observation. Fourth, we want to understand and analyze the approaches and perspectives, such as cultural relativism, to understand our own cultural belief systems while challenging our own biases. And it's always fun because we get to learn about the other cultures in our classroom too. All right. We also want to understand our student learning objectives. What are some of these outcomes, right, that we're going to get out of this particular chapter? To read critically and communicate effectively as writers and speakers on the various cultures around the world, both local and global. 2, to critically and creatively evaluate and analyze certain issues like social stratification and race and ethnic identity, and all of these things in terms of global social problems. Third, we're going to discuss and analyze some of the social implications, some of the pros and cons of gathering data and doing fieldwork and participant observation. Also, if you want to follow along in your cultural anthropology book, there's a free e-version. You can go to archives.org and type in cultural anthropology written by Ember and Ember. And there's a free version. You could borrow it for 14 days and then re-borrow it again. It's a great resource for you to follow along with the book. Also, I put these concept sheets in your module, and it is a concept sheet where it has some objective questions, vocabulary terms. I've been teaching this a long time, like I told you, over 20 years, and my students love the concept sheets. It's sort of an easy way to deconstruct the book. And it has a lot of the content from the chapter and the vocabulary terms and some of the critical thinking questions. The concept sheets are great because you could utilize them for your quizzes, for your exams. They help you when you're writing essays and written assignments. It helps for weekly discussions on the discussion board. And the overall content and vocabulary terms are clarified right within the concept sheets. All right, let's get to culture. All of you have culture, like I said. You have the big culture and the little culture. Culture is learned behaviors, learned values, learned attitudes that we start to acquire from birth, right? We get them from our peers, from friends, from teachers. There are different characteristics within culture that I'm going to talk about. But you guys have to remember, think about this. If somebody picked me up and threw me in another country, I would have a different culture, right? We're sort of born with these blank slates and we acquire them. My ideologies maybe on religion would be different, or my dress would be different, right? My language would be different. What are some of the characteristics of culture? It's shared. It has to be shared by a large amount of people for it to be considered cultural. If I decide I'm going to hop on one foot and you're going to follow me, that's not cultural. But if a large amount of the society does, then we can consider it a cultural trait. Culture is always learned. We acquire it through our lifetime, like I said, from various people. It's not biological. Biology is very important. I also teach biological anthropology, but for this course, it's about the cultural aspects. It's all encompassing. We study all aspects of culture, whether it's marriage, whether it's gender, whether it's race, whether it's identity, whether it's kinship charts, and we study all people, all time periods, all geographical areas, right? It's also adaptive. The traits have to increase our survival within a given environment. If it becomes maladaptive, we might die off. We'll get to that in a minute. The cultural traits also have to be integrated into the existing society. So if there's all these traits, they're not random. So we're going to get those traits that fit into the society we already have. So if, for example, I decide to make an eye dog or an eye cat, that might fit into our society. But if I decide to make a cell phone, maybe the size of this tablet, you may go, no, that's just too big and cumbersome. I don't like it. So we'll reject it. If I threw a cell phone into the 1950s, it might pop right back at me. All right. Culture's always in the midst of change. Some cultures change quicker. Some cultures change more quickly than others. while some don't. It just depends. But we're always at the midst of cultural change because of internal and external factors. Good. Let's get to American culture. All of you in the class are American. You have a lot of different other identities. You might be Latino American, right? You might be Afghanistan American or American, Asian American. But you have that American culture there. What are some of the characteristics or traits of it, right? And I put some here. It could be as simple as apple pie and baseball, but it also could be democracy and capitalism and individualism, right? We could talk about this for a long time, but it also can be things like we're highly technological. So when we look at it, we look at our society, cell phones, technology. It's a huge part of who we are as Americans. All right, let's now get to the family-based culture. All of you might be a little different than your friends and your neighbors and the other students in the classroom because of your family-based culture. So we might vary on that. Let's start with discipline and punishment. Some of you guys might have been given a timeout. Some of you guys might have had your stuff taken away. My kids hated that, right? It's going to be different and there's going to be variation, right? Let's say greetings. In Latino culture, in my particular family, there's a lot of hugging and a lot of kissing, right? Close contact. Some of you might pray 5 times a day. Others may not. Food is very cultural. I always say till this day, I'm in my 40s, my mother still tries to feed my brothers and I. That's her way of showing love. She likes to cook the traditional foods. She likes to send it over, right? Music, chore assignment, all of this, right? We could continue. It could be even as easy as going to your homes. People might have to take off their shoes before they enter into your home, right? Those are family-based ideologies and culture. All right, I also gave you in your module, the Hodza Documentary, the Hodza, the Last of the First. You could get it on Films on Demand at the LMC library, and I gave you the link there. But it really shows a contrast from a global, population like ours. The Hadza are one of the last hunting and gathering societies that live in Tanzania. And they were documented to be located as far back as 50,000 years ago. But there's been new evidence and research that challenges that and says, you know what, these could have been the very first people. And so now they are been faced with a lot of global encroachment. They are going through a mist of culture change rapidly because of deforestation and desertification and, encroachment. They've been pushed off. Their lands have dwindled. But it's a great documentary to look at all aspects of culture. They go through the economics, marriage, politics. They go through medical anthropology. They go through all of these different parts of the Hadza, and they look at how they're adapting within this sort of modernity that's being thrown on them. So it's a great documentary, and I put it in your module so you could go and see it. All right, a subculture. A subculture is like a culture within a culture. It's a sort of a subgroup within society. The easiest way for me to explain this is if you look at high school groups, look at the subgroups within a high school campus, the jocks, the stoners, the skaters, the band kids, the theater kids. Those are subcultural groups. Subcultural groups can also be religious groups. They could be ethnic identities, the Latinos, the Asians. But it's important to sort of understand they're still operating within those larger societies, but then they sort of zone in, maybe have a little bit of dress, a little bit of different lingo. All right, language. Language is very unique to humans. Most species communicate, but they don't have language. That's how we transmit culture quickly, and it's very symbolic and abstract. So if I say, oh my God, I was run over by a truck this weekend. The truck doesn't have to be in the office to run me over, and you guys get a visual image. We share that symbolic experience so you guys can have an idea of what that looked like, right? And then we can talk about it, right? The language is the quickest way we transmit culture to one another. All right, attitudes that hinder the study of culture. Ethnocentric and ethnocentrism are concepts where people judge people based on their own culture. It's very discriminatory. It's very racist. It came out of the school of early cultural evolution, where Edward Tyler and Lewis Henry Morgan put people into stages of development. And within these boxes, they were really negative. It would be like savage and barbaric, and you're a non-human. And like I said, it was very ethnocentric, and it was very discriminatory. And it was just one of these theoretical approaches where the father of anthropology, really conflicted and fought against ethnocentric ideologies. His name was Franz Boas. He was considered to be the father of American anthropology, and he comes up with cultural relativism, and he says this concept is very important because we have to analyze a society adapting within its own environment and within its own context and problems and opportunities. We have to step outside of ours and not be biased. We have to have these non-biases when we're studying culture. All right, let's get to norms. And it's important to understand norms vary cross-culturally. So norms are standard or rules of acceptable behavior. There's two different kinds of norm, direct and indirect, okay? Direct is an obvious behavior in a society. You shouldn't kill in the United States. You shouldn't steal. You shouldn't rape, right? Indirect is a less obvious behavior. It's sort of like me lecturing and then all of a sudden I pass gas or I burp. Sort of less obvious. You're not going to put me in jail for it. But those are the difference between direct and indirect. However, we want to also look at the difference between ideal and actual patterns of behavior. Anthropologists don't care about ideal behavior. Those are our interview behavior. That's where, we're sort of, giving a fake behavior. And we don't want that. We only care about actual patterns of behavior. That's the real behavior. That's what people are doing and how people are behaving. We do fieldwork and participant observation to get through to the actual patterns of behavior. And we typically live in a society for a minimum of a year. And I told you guys about, living in the highlands of Guatemala, doing my field work with, the local Maya there. Fieldwork and participant observation, you're doing a lot of questioning, interviewing, survey sampling. You hope to get invited to all the great events that they have. This really breaks the barriers of the ideal and you really get to the actual patterns of behavior. Another characteristic of culture is culture's always adaptive. You need to increase your chances of survival and reproduction in a given environment, right? An adaptive cultural trait would be wearing a seatbelt. So in case you're in a car accident, it's going to increase your chances of survival. Maladaptive is going to diminish those chances of survival and reproduction, sort of like drug addiction or alcoholism. We're all not drug addicts or alcoholics, right? However, those kinds of behaviors are going to diminish your chances within a given environment. Culture is also integrated. So the traits that we acquire in culture have to fit into the existing society that we have. So if I grab my cell phone, like I said, and I throw it into a different decade, the 1920s, they're going to go, what is this? It's not going to fit. It's going to come right back here, right? So it has to integrate. They're not random, right? And a lot of things we reject as societies to say it's just not going to fit. All right, let's get to active agency. Agency, we all have agency. Even though we're all living in culture, we're not pawns on a chessboard. So what this means is that we make individual choices. So let's say part of culture is marriage. It doesn't mean we're all going to get married. We may make a choice not to. So active agency means we have individualism and we make free choices within our society, right? Culture is just not the only thing guiding us. Culture is also always changing. There's two factors, internal and external factors. An internal factor is a behavioral change, such as like capitalization or commercialization, that says, okay, we've changed from trading to now going into stores and shopping. External factors are factors where change is going to take place if there's a change in the environment. So let's say there's a drought, right? That's an external factor, a drought. We have to take shorter showers. We're going to let our grasses turn green. We're going to use water, refillable water containers. We're not going to overuse water, right? There's going to be certain things. It's a response to a change in the environment. Internal, external factors. All right, what's the overview of this unit? We talked about the concept of culture, the characteristics of culture, right? The differences, right? If we were thrown into a different culture, norms, ideal versus actual patterns of behavior, and of course, our own agency within the system. Culture is very unique. I can't wait to get to know all of you and understand your cultures and learn about you, right? We have diversity in the classroom, and this is going to be a very fun semester. Have a great day. Thanks for joining.